Timur Tamerlane is one of history's despite his brutal reputation. In fact, some historians even rank him above other famous generals like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. But who was Timur? And why should you care about him? Well, that's what I'm here to explain. So, Timur Timur was born in 1336 in the Central Asian steppe. His birth name was Timur, but the Western world knows him as Tamerlane. That's because when Europeans first encountered his empire, they thought he must be the legendary conqueror of the ancient Persians known as Cyrus the Great. So, they started calling him Cyrus II, which got anglicized into Timur. And while Timur might not have been Cyrus the Great, he did build a huge empire stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. His empire was built on blood and plunder. Timur led hundreds of military campaigns during his lifetime, killing an estimated 17 million people and enslaving many more. Under his rule, entire cities could vanish overnight, as their inhabitants were put to death for the crime of not submitting to him. Some of the cities he destroyed include Delhi, Baghdad, and Moscow. Yet, despite his brutality, he is still celebrated as a hero, So how on earth can one man be both revered and reviled? Well, let's find out. After Timur was born, his father died, and his mother had to flee with her young son to escape rival warlords. They lived in poverty for years until Timur formed an alliance with another clan leader named Hussein and married his daughter. It gave him the political connections he needed to eventually seize the city of Samarkand and make it his capital in 1360. Then founded Timur. Named after his ancestor Timur, a Mongol chieftain who fought under Genghis Khan. Now, you might notice, I keep calling Timur a conqueror, but so far I've only mentioned him taking the city of Samarkand because Timur didn't conquer all of his lands at once. In fact, he spent the first 2 decades of his reign mostly trying to hold on to Samarkand itself. Warlords from neighboring Persia, the Ottoman Empire, and the Golden Horde kept trying to take it away from him. The constant pressure turned Samarkand into a militarized fortress state where subjects had to flee from over. In fact, that wasn't really Timur's style. He really wanted to do that, so in 1383, Timur launched a series of military campaigns known collectively as the Moscow, Baghdad, and Delhi campaigns, which saw him defeat the Golden Horde, the Ottoman Empire, and the Delhi Sultanate, respectively. After these wars, he became the dominant power in Central Asia, and he used that position to restore the Silk Roads and revitalize trade between Europe and Asia. It also didn't hurt that he pillaged and plundered all those places he just defeated, taking back untold riches that had been lost to greed and corruption under previous rulers. In fact, the amount of wealth Timur accumulated is one reason he's been given the nickname Timur the Great. Despite being half Mongol, he wasn't particularly good on horseback and supposedly limped badly after breaking his leg in a riding accident early in life. This image of him as the lame old man lounging around in silk pajamas while stroking a cat has been propagated by Western historians since. It makes for a fun caricature of a monster, but it doesn't reflect the reality of who Timur was. The Timur who appears in historical records was a brilliant strategist and tactician, highly cultured and educated in both Islamic theology and the classics of Central Asian nomadic culture. He dressed like a traditional Central Asian horseman and was skilled with the bow and sword. He was also half black himself, and despite his anti-Mongol rhetoric, he ruled over a multi-ethnic and multi-faith empire that included Muslims, Christians, Jews, and even one of the main reasons he was able to conquer such a vast area was his use of gunpowder weapons. Unlike the Mongols, who generally tried to avoid large-scale battles with settled peoples, preferring to rely on stealth and mobility to achieve victory, Timur took a more direct approach. He built massive cannon arrays that would level entire cities and smash his enemies in open battle. During his 40-year reign, he waged war in every direction, conquering modern-day Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan. Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, China, India, Iraq, Syria, Palestine, and Russia. But his biggest victory came against the Ottomans and the Delhi Sultanate. The Ottoman Empire was still a relatively new state in 1380 when Timur decided to smash them in Anatolia, but it was exactly that news that made them so dangerous. The Ottoman Sultan Murad I was a brilliant strategist, and had already expanded the Ottoman realm into the Balkans. When Timur's army showed up, Murad decided to run. But as he fled, Timur's men cut him down and headed north. This ended the campaign in Anatolia, but Timur didn't destroy the Ottoman Empire. In fact, he made it stronger in the long term by killing Murad and replacing him with his 10-year-old son Bayezid. Bayezid went on to conquer much of South Europe and Eastern Africa, and is known as the Sultan who conquered 3 continents. So perhaps Timur's greatest legacy is the Ottoman Empire? And if that sounds impressive, wait until I tell you about the Delhi Sultanate. In 3098, Timur's army marched into India. It was a land of immense wealth, but it was also home to rival kingdoms that had previously kept each other in check. With the Timurid gone, there was nothing stopping Delhi from raising an elite force of 200,000 soldiers and conquering most of northern India. The Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq planned to march across the Indus River and meet Timur's forces in battle. But before he could do that, Timur's army arrived at Delhi and leveled the city in a single day. It killed between 1 and 3 million people and enslaved many more. It was one of the worst disasters in Indian history. And it left the subcontinent the last independent kingdom in northern India fell to the Mughals in 1586. And the Mughals themselves were eventually conquered by the British East India Company. So, perhaps Timur's second greatest legacy is British colonialism in India. Now, like Alexander the Great, Timur was a warrior king who carved out a massive empire, but he died before completing it. Timur suffered a serious illness in 1405, and he died 10 years later on February 18, 1405. He'd already picked out his successor, his grandson, Shah. But the old Timur wasn't fully confident in his grandson's ability. So he divided the empire among 4 of his sons and left instructions that they should share power equally. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. Soon after Timur died, the empire began to fragment along ethnic lines. The various cousins who now ruled the Timurid states went to war with each other constantly, and it wasn't until 1508 that they finally broke each other and brought the empire crashing down. Despite the brevity of his reign, Timur is still considered one of the greatest military commanders in history. He pioneered the use of gunpowder artillery, was a master of logistics, supplying his massive armies as they marched thousands of miles across hostile terrain. One of the most impressive things about his military record is that he almost always fought on foreign soil. In fact, he never even set foot in Russia, yet he managed to sack Moscow twice and drive the Golden Horde out of the Black Sea. He achieved this by creating a new kind of army. The Timurid army was made up of professional soldiers who served in a standing army. They also introduced accounting rules to the military, meaning that soldiers could become accountants. This helped Timur to feed and equip the largest armies in history. At one point, his invasion force into India numbered nearly 1.5 million men. For comparison, Napoleon's army was around 60,000. However, Timur's greatest achievement may have been his loyalty. Like Genghis Khan, he was a product of the Central Asian steppe, a place where nomadic horse cultures meet sedentary agricultural races. This gave Timur a unique perspective on the world. He recognized that trade and cultural exchange benefited all parties involved in that military conquest to bring great wealth and power to his empire. He was a patron of the arts and science, and his court in Samarkand was one of the most sophisticated in the medieval world. Unfortunately, he was also racist and xenophobic. He hated the Persians and Arabs because he thought they were culturally and racially inferior. So despite his cosmopolitan outlook, his empire was never truly inclusive. He envisioned a world ruled by strong, centralized governments and feared the growing power of independent city-states like Venice. This led him to form an alliance with the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid, who shared Timur's fears about the rise of maritime trade. After Timur died, The Timur Empire fragmented, but its legacy lived on in the art and architecture of Central Asia and the military thinking of Russia. His tomb is in Samarkand, and it's one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. It seems fitting that the place where Timur's body rests would be so magnificent. Because no matter what you think of him, there's no denying that he was a force of nature. He was a conqueror without peer, a patron of the arts, and a military genius. He was also a monster, a genocidal maniac who delighted in cruelty. It was Timur, the man who cheated. Okay, Timur, buffs and nerds. I know you're out there. How would you rate Timur as a military commander? Also, what's your favorite historical empire? Let me know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. See you next time.